Not the dramatic kind. Not shadows or shapes. Just absence. A black screen with a faint electronic grain beneath it. The quiet noise of a system still running, even when nothing is happening. Then, without warning, the feed activates. A hallway appears. Narrow, institutional, painted a tired off-white that once promised cleanliness and order. The fluorescent lights hum overhead, uneven in their rhythm, as if one of them has been awake for too long. The camera is mounted high in the corner, angled slightly downward, fixed, unblinking. The timestamp blinks into place in the lower right corner. 021743 a.m. No people, no movement. The hallway is empty. At the far end, a closed door, metal, scuffed near the handle, a small placard bolted beside it, unreadable at this distance. On the left wall, a fire extinguisher behind glass. On the right, a row of identical doors, all shut, all silent. Nothing happens. And then, the system logs motion. Somewhere in a windowless room several floors away, a notification chimes. Soft, polite, almost apologetic. A motion alert. Security staff glance up from their monitors. This isn't unusual. Motion sensors are sensitive. Fluorescent flicker, electrical interference, a moth passing too close to a lens. One of them clicks the feed open. The hallway fills the screen. Still empty. The alert clears. 10 seconds pass. Another chime. Motion detected. The same feed, the same hallway, the same stillness. The camera adjusts its focus slightly, the image sharpening and softening in a slow, mechanical breath. The fluorescent lights flicker, but only for a moment. The timestamp continues its steady march forward. 021758 a.m. No footsteps, no shadows sliding across the floor, no doors opening. The system insists something is there. The humans watching it see nothing. At first, they joke, a tired comment about the building being haunted, a half smile, someone rubs their eyes, someone else reaches for cold coffee. The night shift always stretches time. Minutes feel longer after midnight. Sounds feel heavier. The alert sounds again and again. Each time, the same result. An empty corridor, a still image that refuses to explain itself. The system's confidence begins to feel unsettling. Motion detection doesn't trigger randomly this often. The parameters are narrow, the thresholds conservative. This hallway has been quiet for weeks. Now it won't stop calling for attention. One guard leans closer to the screen. "Rewind it," he says. They do. The footage plays back at normal speed, then slower, frame by frame. Nothing enters the frame. Nothing leaves it. The floor remains undisturbed. No change in lighting, no flicker that could explain a false positive, no visible cause. The log, however, continues to populate. 021811 a.m. Motion detected. 021826 a.m. Motion detected. Every 15 seconds. Perfectly regular, like a pulse. The low mechanical hum of the camera's audio feed becomes noticeable now, not loud enough to demand attention, but persistent enough to make silence feel incomplete. The kind of sound you stop hearing until it stops. Someone adjusts the volume. There's no voice, no footsteps echoing from beyond the microphone's reach, just the hum, and beneath it, something else, a faint electronic hiss, the sound of circuitry working harder than it should. The guard on duty checks the sensor diagnostics. All systems normal. No false reported. No maintenance flags. The camera is awake, alert, certain. The hallway remains indifferent. They begin checking adjacent feeds, other corridors, stairwells, entrances. Nothing. Only this camera. Only this space. The idea that something could be acknowledged by a machine but not perceived by a person settles slowly. It doesn't arrive as fear, it arrives as irritation. A puzzle. A problem that should have an answer. Someone suggests cleaning the lens in the morning. Someone else suggests recalibrating the sensor. The alerts continue. After the fifth one, the joking stops. The room grows quieter. The guards stop multitasking. Phones are set aside. Chairs pull closer to the monitors. Eyes linger longer on the screen than necessary. They are waiting for something to happen. They don't know what. The hallway, unchanged, begins to feel staged, like a set waiting for actors who never arrive. The fluorescent lights cast shadows that don't move, stretching into corners that the camera cannot see. The timestamp advances. 2:20 a.m. 3 minutes of motion. 0 explanation. One guard notices something small. The focus shift. It happens every time the alert triggers. The camera adjusts itself, as if trying to track movement that doesn't register visually. A subtle tightening of the image, a fractional correction. As though something is passing through the frame, just not in a way that leaves a mark. They watch closely now, waiting for the adjustment. There, a slight shift. The hallway sharpens, then relaxes. Motion detected. Nothing there. A question hangs in the room, unspoken, because no one wants to be the first to give it shape. What does the system think it sees? Another alert. This time the guard reaches for the incident log. He begins typing. Repeated motion alerts, no visible cause. It feels insufficient. The building itself is old, retrofitted, layers of technology laid over decades of use. Wires run through walls that have held other systems before them. The camera was installed years ago, after an incident no one on the night shift remembers clearly. It has watched this hallway for a long time. It has never behaved like this. 2:21:15 a.m. Motion detected. The guard marks the time. The hallway remains empty, but the feeling is changed. The absence no longer feels neutral, it feels observed. The camera's unblinking eye is no longer just recording, it is reacting, responding, acknowledging something that refuses to announce itself. One guard leans back and exhales slowly. "This thing's stuck," he says, but there's no conviction in it. No one answers. They keep watching. The alerts slow, then stop. Silence returns. The hallway remains on the screen, unchanged, empty, still. The guards wait a full minute. Nothing. Someone starts to relax. Then the alert sounds again. Louder this time, only because the room has gone so quiet. Motion detected. The camera refocuses. The timestamp reads 2:23:02 a.m., and for the first time, the system adds a note. Object classification, unknown. No one speaks. They stare at the word on the screen. Unknown. Not a person, not an animal, not debris, not shadow. Unknown. The hallway does not respond. It offers no clarification, no movement, no sound, no sign of disturbance. Just a corridor that insists, through the language of machines, that it is not empty. The guards log the event. Protocol demands it. They tag the footage, save the segment, flag it for review. A file is created automatically by the system, a string of numbers and letters, cold, administrative, unemotional. The kind of identifier that will later be shortened, renamed, referred to by something easier to say. For now, it is just a file, a record of something that happened without happening. The camera continues to watch the hallway. The humans continue to watch the camera. Nothing else occurs before the end of the shift. No error report arrives with the morning staff. No technician finds a loose wire or faulty sensor. The alerts are not repeated. The hallway remains in silence. But the footage remains. Stored, time-stamped, unresolved. This is the moment the file was created.
The file does not open with an explanation. It opens with a label, file number 006, printed in plain black text. No warning symbols, no classification stamps, no dramatic language, just an identifier assigned automatically by a system that had no reason to believe this record would matter. Below it, a location, a municipal building with restricted access. No address listed, no department named, only a reference code that ties the building to city property records and internal maintenance schedules. This was not a place meant to draw attention. It housed offices that closed early, storage rooms no one visited unless required, corridors that existed to connect other corridors, a building designed to disappear into routine. The reason for sealing the file appears next. Unresolved incident, incomplete findings, internal disagreement. 3 lines, each one carefully chosen, each one insufficient on its own. Together, they form a kind of refusal. The archivist pauses here, not for dramatic effect, but because this is where most files end. When an incident has no outcome, no resolution, no clear failure to correct, it is often sealed not to preserve truth, but to contain discomfort. The contents of file 006 are thin, not because little happened, but because so much of it was never pursued. The first item inside is an incident log, digital, time-stamped, written in the neutral language of night shift documentation. Repeated motion alerts from camera C17, no visible activity observed. No adjectives, no speculation, just a description of a system doing something it was designed to do, and humans noting that it didn't make sense. The log continues for several pages. Alert times, confirmation checks, notes marked reviewed, all written by different hands, each one echoing the same conclusion. No visible cause. The archivist reads these entries slowly. They were written by people who had no intention of being part of a mystery, people whose job was to observe, document, and move on. None of them use the word fear. None of them mention unease. But between the lines, something changes. Early entries are brief. Later ones grow longer. Explanations are offered, then crossed out. A note appears beside one timestamp. Focus shift observed without visible trigger. Another entry follows minutes later. Sensor diagnostics, normal. Someone writes, will escalate for daytime review. That review never occurs. The next archival element is a maintenance report, mostly redacted. Entire paragraphs replaced with black bars, dates and technician names removed. Only the headings remain intact. Inspection summary, findings, recommendations. Under findings, a single unredacted line survives. No mechanical or electrical faults detected. The archivist lets that sentence sit. It is the kind of statement meant to close a case. Instead, it opens one. The recommendations section is empty. No recalibration scheduled, no component replacement, no follow-up inspection. The report ends with a signature block that contains no name, just an authorization code. The absence of action becomes its own kind of record. Next, the file includes audio transcripts, not recordings, transcripts. Pages of time-stamped text, each line prefaced by a speaker label that reads simply unidentified. There are no voices attached to these words, no tonal markers, no inflection notes, just fragments. Did you see that? See what? The focus shift. It keeps doing it. Just log it. Yeah. The archivist notes the ellipses. They appear often. Pauses that were long enough to be recorded, but not long enough to be explained. In one transcript, a line is repeated twice. I don't like this. There is no response. The transcript ends shortly after. The surveillance stills come next, dozens of them, each one captured at the moment an alert was triggered, each one identical. The same hallway, the same doors, the same lighting, the same emptiness. They are remarkable only in their sameness. Nothing circles, nothing is highlighted, no anomalies are pointed out, and yet each image is stamped with the same word in the metadata: flagged. The archivist turns the page. There are internal emails, short, carefully worded. A supervisor asks why the alerts were escalated if nothing was visible.
A guard replies that protocol was followed. Another supervisor suggests waiting to see if the issue repeats. It does not. And because it does not, no further action is taken. This is where the file should have closed. Instead, it lingers. The sealing order appears several pages later. It is brief. File 006 to be sealed pending further review. No timeline, no assigned reviewer, no criteria for reopening. Just an instruction to stop looking. What follows is not official documentation. It is marginalia. Notes added days later, weeks later. Some typed, some handwritten and scanned. A security officer requests reassignment away from overnight monitoring. Reason given, sleep disruption. A supervisor delays a scheduled review meeting twice, then cancels it entirely. Reason given, staffing constraints. A technician submits a request not to be assigned to camera C17 diagnostics. Reason given, prior involvement. None of these notes reference fear. They reference inconvenience, fatigue, administrative burden. But when read together, they describe avoidance. People stopped watching the footage, not because it showed something disturbing, but because it left them with a feeling they could not file away. One note stands out, written weeks after the incident during a routine audit. No further alerts recorded. Recommend closure. Someone has underlined the word closure. Next to it, in a different hand, a question mark. The archivist lingers here, because this is the point where the case shifts. The file was not sealed because of what the camera saw. The stills show nothing. The transcripts say little. The logs are uneventful. It was sealed because of what the people involved carried with them afterward. A sense that the system had reacted to something real. A sense that something had passed through the building without leaving evidence behind. Not violently, not dramatically, just present enough to be noticed and then gone. One guard reportedly asked weeks later if the hallway had been renovated. He couldn't say why. Another mentioned feeling watched while reviewing unrelated footage. No formal complaints were filed, no incidents were linked, but the discomfort persisted. Quietly, like the low hum of the camera's audio feed, barely noticeable until it stops. The archivist closes the folder slightly, then opens it again. File 006 does not accuse, it does not explain. It documents a moment when technology insisted on acknowledging something that humans could not agree on, and when faced with that disagreement, the institution chose stillness. The building remains in use, the camera remains mounted in the same corner. The hallway looks the same today as it did that night. According to the records, nothing ever happened there. And yet, the file exists. Sealed not to protect the public, sealed not to preserve evidence, but to allow those involved to return to their routines without having to explain why a perfectly empty hallway made them uneasy long after the screen went dark. The archivist notes the final line of the sealing order: "No further action required at this time." Time passes, the file remains closed, and whatever prompted the system to wake up that night is never acknowledged again, by machines or by people. The seal holds, for now. Before the alerts, before the file number, before anyone learned to avoid a particular stretch of corridor without quite knowing why, there was the city. Not the city of headlines or monuments, just the working city. Offices opening and closing on schedule, streetlights clicking on at dusk, municipal buildings settling into their nightly quiet. The year is unremarkable in the records. Budgets were tight, systems were aging, upgrades happened slowly, in phases, often years behind plan. Nothing about that period stands out unless you already know where to look. Public buildings stayed open long after the public left. Someone had to lock doors, someone had to walk floors, someone had to sit in rooms filled with monitors, watching spaces that rarely changed. Security work was quiet labor, not heroic, not dramatic, mostly waiting. Cameras had become background noise by then, installed after small incidents, forgotten once they proved reliable. Their feeds played on loop, familiar enough that guards could sense change without consciously watching. A flicker where there shouldn't be one, a door left ajar, a light that failed to turn off. Most nights, nothing happened. That was the point. The building that would later generate File 006 was one of many, a municipal structure with restricted access, but no secrets worth protecting. Offices for departments whose work continued regardless of public attention. Records, storage, internal operations. It closed to the public before evening. After that, it belonged to routine. The hallway existed as architecture, nothing more. Painted walls, durable flooring, fluorescent lighting chosen for efficiency rather than comfort, the kind of corridor designed to be passed through, not occupied. Cleaning staff moved through it nightly. Their carts rolled softly over the floor, wheels clicking at the seams. Trash bins were emptied, smudges wiped away. The lights reflected dully off freshly cleaned surfaces. Footsteps echoed, then faded. The hallway absorbed them without response. Day staff crossed it with coffee in hand, thinking about deadlines, meetings, commutes home. Some walked quickly, some slowly. No one lingered. Why would they? The doors along its length opened and closed at predictable hours. Nothing inside them required the hallway's attention. It was not a destination. It was a space between. Thousands of passes, tens of thousands. No one remembered the first time they walked through it. No one noticed the last. Night shift guards learned the building by repetition. Which floors creaked, which lights flickered, which cameras occasionally lagged by a fraction of a second. They learned where to pause during patrols, where the air felt cooler, where the hum of electricity grew louder near old wiring. The hallway was not one of those places. It offered nothing to remember. One guard, years later, would struggle to describe it from memory. Just a hallway, he would say. That was true. The cameras mounted there were installed during a routine expansion. New coverage to reduce blind spots. The angle was calculated. The position approved. No objections, no discussion. Once installed, the camera blended into the background like everything else. It watched, and nothing gave it reason to react. The system logged countless hours of inactivity, empty frames, unbroken stillness. The guards on duty rarely looked directly at that feed, not because it was avoided, but because it was predictable. A still hallway was reassuring. It meant nothing was wrong. In the language of surveillance, boredom was success. The people who worked those shifts were ordinary. They came in tired and left tired. Some were students, some were parents, some were older, counting years until retirement. They brought sandwiches from home. They complained about the air conditioning. They learned each other's habits, who preferred silence, who needed the radio low, who drank too much coffee after midnight. The building became part of that rhythm, a place that asked little of them. They did not think of themselves as witnesses. They were caretakers of quiet. The hallway was cleaned so often that it smelled faintly of disinfectant and wax. That smell lingered in the early morning hours, mixing with stale air and fluorescent heat.
No one associated it with unease. No one paused before stepping into it. Even the camera itself was unremarkable. Its specifications were standard, its firmware up to date, its field of view consistent. It had no reason to develop a personality. If asked, the technicians would have described it as reliable, dependable, boring. In old maintenance logs, the camera is mentioned only twice before the incident, once for a scheduled inspection, once for a routine firmware update. Both entries end the same way, operating within normal parameters. Normal. That word appears often in the records. Normal hours, normal staffing, normal conditions. The hallway existed inside that word. It was normal to the point of invisibility. When people think back now, they struggle to locate it in memory before the alerts. It does not anchor itself to any event. No arguments happened there, no accidents, no conversations worth recalling, nothing that would have made someone stop and think, this place matters. The archivist notes this carefully because meaning in cases like this often arrives after the fact. We look backward and search for signs, patterns, warnings. But before the camera woke up, there was nothing to interpret, only repetition, only habit, only a building doing what buildings do, standing quietly while people passed through it, leaving fragments of their days behind without noticing. The guards did not speak about the hallway because there was nothing to say. The cleaning staff did not linger because there was no reason to. The technicians did not flag the camera because it did not demand attention. Even the system itself treated the space as static, unchanging, predictable. The city moved on around it. Budgets were approved, elections came and went, departments reorganized, new signage appeared, then faded. The hallway remained the same. And then, one night, the system reacted, not because the hallway had changed, but because something else did. Or because the system finally noticed something it had been ignoring for years. That question remains unanswered. What matters is this. Before the alerts, the hallway did not exist as a story. It was architecture. It was routine. It was so thoroughly ordinary when the camera insisted on remembering it. No one else knew how. The archivist closes this chapter on that thought, not with fear, not with speculation, but with the weight of normalcy, because it is only against that backdrop of quiet labor, of unnoticed spaces, of nights that passed without incident, that the later discomfort makes sense. No one remembers the hallway because it was unremarkable, until the moment the camera remembered it for them and refused to forget. The first alerts do not announce themselves. They arrive quietly, folded into routine. Weeks before the night that would later define File 006, the system logs a single motion detection from camera C17. It lasts less than a second. The hallway appears unchanged. The alert clears itself. It is marked as a glitch. Dust, maybe. A shift in air pressure when the building's ventilation cycles adjust after midnight. A loose cable that settles when the temperature drops. These explanations are not written down. They don't need to be. They are familiar, comfortable. The kind of answers that allow a guard to keep watching without really watching. The next alert comes 3 nights later. Same camera, same hallway, same emptiness. It occurs at 02:11 a.m. The timestamp is noted only because it is there, not because it feels important. Again, the alert clears. Again, it is dismissed. By the third alert, someone adds a comment to the log, possibly environmental. No one investigates further.
Early irregularities are easy to ignore because they do not disrupt anything. They do not demand action. They do not come with consequences. They exist only as data points, small enough to be overlooked, isolated enough to feel accidental. But the system remembers them, and it begins to repeat itself. The alerts never occur during the early part of the night, not during evening patrols, not during shift changes, not when cleaning staff are still present. They happen later, after midnight, after the building settles, after the guards have been sitting long enough for time to slow. The hours are not identical, but they are close. 0207, 0211, 0218, always within the same narrow window. Always from camera C17, always from the same stretch of hallway. Other cameras remain quiet. The stairwells show nothing. The entrances remain still. Exterior feeds record nothing but empty sidewalks and passing headlights. Only the hallway responds. A guard notices this one night and scrolls back through the logs. He doesn't say anything at first. He just looks longer than usual. Patterns are dangerous in this job. You are trained not to see them, to assume coincidence, to trust that systems fail randomly, not intentionally. But this feels selective. He hesitates before marking the alert as false. His finger hovers over the keyboard. Then he presses the key. False alarm. The word feels heavier than it should. A week later, the alerts have become frequent enough to be annoying. They interrupt paperwork, they break concentration, they demand acknowledgement even when nothing is happening. The guards begin to react differently. Not outwardly, there is no panic. No one calls a supervisor in the middle of the night, but something shifts. They stop joking when the alert chimes. They lean forward in their chairs longer. They watch the monitor for a few seconds longer before clearing it. The hallway never changes, but their relationship to it does. One guard begins to delay logging the alert, just by a few seconds. He wants to be sure. He doesn't know what he's waiting for. Another guard replays the feed twice instead of once, frame by frame, even though he knows it will show nothing new. The system continues its quiet insistence. Motion detected, nothing visible. Motion detected, nothing visible. Maintenance is notified. A technician checks the camera during daytime hours. He wipes the lens, tests the wiring, runs diagnostics. Everything passes. He leaves a note. No issues found. The alerts continue. Now they are happening almost nightly. Not every night, but often enough to be expected. Security staff begin to anticipate them. As the clock approaches 2 a.m., someone glances at the monitor without realizing why. The body learns before the mind does. One guard mentions the alerts to another during a shift change, not formally, just as an aside. That hallway camera has been weird lately. The other nods. I know. That is all they say. The logs begin to show hesitation, not in the language. The language remains professional, restrained, but in the timing. Alerts that used to be cleared immediately now sit unacknowledged for longer stretches. 30 seconds, a minute, 2. No policy is being broken, but something is being avoided. One night, a guard adjusts the volume on his console. He lowers it slightly, not enough to mute the system entirely, just enough to soften it. Later, when asked why, he struggles to explain. There was no sound from the hallway, no voice.
No footstep. The camera's audio feed was empty except for the low mechanical hum. But when the alert triggered, the silence that followed felt heavier, as if it pressed in. Lowering the volume made it easier to breathe. The guard does not write this down. He writes, "Alert acknowledged, no activity observed." But the adjustment remains. Another guard begins to reposition his chair. He angles it so the monitor with camera C17 is slightly off to the side, not directly in front of him. He still sees it, he just doesn't want it centered. None of this is discussed openly. There are no meetings, no memos, just small, personal changes, ways of coping that never make it into the file. The system, however, continues to log. The timestamps form a column. The camera ID repeats, C17, C17,
C17, always the same. The supervisor notices the pattern during a routine review. He flags it briefly, then unflags it. There is no obvious fault to correct. Escalation would require explanation. Explanation would require admitting that something feels wrong. Feelings are not actionable, so the file remains thin. The guards carry the weight instead. One of them begins to avoid looking at the monitor when the alert sounds. He clears it by reflex, eyes focused elsewhere. Later, he worries about this. What if something does appear one night? What if he misses it? The thought unsettles him more than the alerts themselves. He starts watching again, watching harder, watching longer. The hallway remains unchanged, which somehow makes it worse, because if nothing is happening, then why does it feel like something is being repeated? Why does the system keep insisting? The archivist pauses here, because this is where the cracks form. Not in the technology, not in the building, but in the people tasked with making sense of both. They are not frightened, not yet. They are uncomfortable, and discomfort is difficult to justify. It has no clear cause, no clear remedy. By the time the main incident occurs, the night when the alerts refuse to stop, the guards are already carrying weeks of unresolved tension. They have learned to expect the chime. They have learned to dread the stillness that follows. They have learned that the hallway does not change, even when the system says it has. The first irregularities are never dramatic. They're small, persistent, easy to explain away individually, impossible to ignore when viewed together. The archivist closes this chapter quietly, not with a revelation, but with accumulation. Because by the time the file is officially created, the camera has already been speaking for weeks, and the people listening have already begun to change the way they sit in their chairs, the way they watch, the way they mark reports, and the way they lower the volume, not to escape sound, but because silence had started to feel like pressure. And pressure, once noticed, is difficult to forget.
The night begins without significance. A routine handover, two guards exchanging brief notes that don't require writing down. Nothing outstanding, nothing unresolved. The building is quiet in the way it usually is after midnight. Not silent, but settled. Coffee is poured and forgotten. A paper cup sits near a keyboard, steam thinning, then vanishing. The taste will be bitter by the time anyone remembers it. Monitors glow in a darkened room. A dozen feeds, empty lobbies, locked doors, stairwells with no footsteps to echo. The hum of servers fills the space between thoughts. 1:53 a.m. The outgoing guard leaves. The door closes softly behind him. The night belongs to the remaining staff now. They settle into their chairs, adjust screens, breathe out. Nothing feels different. 2:01 a.m. The first alert arrives. Motion detected. Camera C17. The hallway appears on the primary monitor. Empty. One of the guards glances at the clock. He notes the time out of habit, not concern. Clears the alert. Takes a sip of coffee. Grimaces. It's already cold. 2:06 a.m. The second alert. Same camera, same frame. He doesn't clear it immediately this time. He watches for a few seconds longer than necessary, waits for something to justify the interruption. Nothing does. He clears it. 2:10 a.m. Another alert. The radio on the desk crackles briefly, static, then quiet again. No one is speaking on it. The building's internal channels remain silent. The guard shifts in his chair. "This again," he says, not to anyone in particular. 2:14 a.m. Alert. 2:17 a.m. Alert. The timestamps are closer now. The hallway does not change. The camera's focus adjusts slightly with each trigger, a subtle mechanical correction. Tighten.
Release. Tighten. Release. The motion log begins to fill. 2:29 a.m. Alert. One guard pulls the log window open on a secondary screen. He scrolls back through the last hour. His finger pauses on the mouse. "It's not stopping," he says. The other guard leans closer. "Same one?" "Yeah." They watch together now. 2:22 a.m. Alert. The coffee cup is pushed aside, forgotten completely. 2:24 a.m. Alert. The system does not escalate, it does not alarm, it simply continues to acknowledge motion that no one can see. They begin speaking more deliberately, not panicked, measured, as if volume and speed might affect what's happening. Could be the sensor lagging. Diagnostics were clean. Could still be acting up. No one sounds convinced. 2:27 a.m. Alert. The guards exchange a look. Not fear, recognition. They have both been expecting this. 2:30 a.m. The alerts are now nearly continuous. One clears as another arrives. The hallway remains unchanged. The fluorescent lights hum steadily. The doors stay shut. The far wall remains empty. The radio crackles again. One guard keys the mic. "Control to maintenance? Anyone on?" Silence. He releases the button. 2:33 a.m. Alert. He logs it, not because protocol demands it, but because something in him wants a record, a trail, proof that this is happening. 2:36 a.m. Alert. The system flags persistent motion. A new line appears beneath the feed. Duration threshold exceeded. No one speaks. 2:40 a.m. Alert. The guards stop clearing them immediately. They let the system continue logging. They are tired, not physically, not yet, but mentally. The repetition wears at them. 2:44 a.m. Alert. The hallway feels closer somehow. Not visually, emotionally, as if attention itself has weight. 2:47 a.m. Alert. One guard adjusts the volume again. Lower. The hum becomes softer, but it doesn't go away. Silence presses in around it. 2:50 a.m. The system hesitates. For a moment, nothing happens. Both guards breathe out at the same time. Then, 2:12 a.m. Alert. But this one is different. The text beneath the feed updates. Proximity detected. The camera does not zoom, the frame does not change, but the metadata does. Something, according to the system, is close to the lens, close enough to register distance. The guards lean forward. "How?" one asks quietly. There is no answer. They rewind the feed, play it back, frame by frame. The hallway remains empty. No distortion, no shadow passing across the lens, no change in lighting. But the proximity flag remains in the log. 2:51 a.m. Alert. Another proximity flag. Then another. The system now believes something is not just moving, but approaching. The guards do not joke. They do not speculate out loud. They simply watch. 2:54 a.m. Alert. The radio crackles again. A voice comes through this time, distant and unclear. Anyone else seeing? Static cuts it off. The guard keys the mic again.
Say again? No response. 2:57 a.m. Alert. The system adds a note. Object classification, unknown. The same word that will later trouble reviewers. Unknown. The hallway offers no clarification. 3 a.m. An hour has passed since the first alert.
Neither guard has left his chair. Neither has checked his phone. Time has narrowed to the screen. 3:02 a.m. Alert. One guard speaks, slowly. "We should archive this." The other nods. Not immediately, after another alert. 3:04 a.m. Alert. "If it keeps logging, we'll lose older footage," the first guard says. Erasure is standard. Footage overwrites itself unless flagged. The system assumes nothing important happens most nights. This night challenges that assumption. 3:06 a.m. Alert. The decision settles between them. Not dramatic, practical. They select the option. Archive footage. The system confirms. Storage allocated. Overwrite disabled. 3:07 a.m. Alert. Now each trigger is preserved. 3:10 a.m. The alerts begin to slow, still frequent, but no longer constant. The proximity flags stop appearing. The hallway returns to stillness, at least visually. 3:14 a.m. Alert. Then, nothing. The system goes quiet. The guards wait. 30 seconds. A minute. 2. No new alerts. 3:18 a.m. The hallway remains empty. The camera no longer adjusts its focus. The hum continues, unchanged. One guard leans back. Only now does he realize how tense his shoulders are. 3:22 a.m. No alerts. 3:30 a.m. Still nothing. The night resumes its earlier shape, but neither guard feels relief. They feel something closer to aftermath. They finish logging, carefully, precisely. No speculation, no commentary, just timestamps and facts. When the shift ends, they do not talk much. They leave the room quieter than they entered it. The footage remains, archived, untouched. It will be reviewed later, by supervisors, by technicians, by archivists. But in that moment, the decision is simple. They did not erase it. They chose to keep it. Not because they understood what it showed, but because something about that hour felt like it deserved to be remembered. The archivist ends the reconstruction here, at the point where choice enters the record, because everything that follows, the ceiling, the discomfort, the silence, begins with this decision: to let the footage exist, to acknowledge that even when nothing appears to happen, something may still need to be kept, logged, remembered. The night ends. The file remains open, for now.
The investigation begins in daylight. That alone changes everything. Sunlight reaches parts of the building that never feel quite real at night. Corners soften, shadows lose their weight. The hallway looks smaller, less imposing, reduced back to what it has always been, a passageway between offices. Technicians arrive with clipboards and laptops. Engineers review logs with coffee still in their hands. The language shifts. Night words are replaced with day words. Interference, latency, false positives. The system is treated as a problem to be solved. Camera C17 is inspected first. The lens is cleaned again. The housing is opened. Wires are checked for wear, corrosion, anything that could explain erratic signals. Nothing is found. The camera passes every test. Motion sensitivity is calibrated. Detection thresholds are adjusted. The proximity sensor is isolated and examined. It responds exactly as designed, only when an object enters the specified range. The engineers run simulations. They walk the hallway, wave clipboards, open and close doors. Nothing triggers the same behavior. The logs are replayed, frame by frame, in a bright room with windows. No one feels watched. No one lowers the volume. The system behaves perfectly. Software analysis follows. Engineers examine the detection algorithms.
They look for loops, conflicts, memory errors. They check for timestamp corruption. They check for network lag. They find none. The system did exactly what it was programmed to do. Every alert corresponds to an internal confidence threshold being met. Movement was detected, proximity was calculated, classification failed. That is all the data can say. The investigation grows quiet, because a system that works correctly but produces an uncomfortable result is difficult to argue with. So, attention shifts, not to the machines, but to the people. Logs are reviewed again, this time not for technical faults, but for response patterns, delayed acknowledgements, repeated clearing of alerts without escalation, notes marked environmental without verification. Nothing here violates policy, but taken together, it tells a story of hesitation, of fatigue, of a slow drift from curiosity to avoidance. The guards are interviewed, informally at first. How did the alerts make you feel? The question catches some of them off guard. They are used to describing actions, not reactions. One guard shrugs, annoying. Another says, distracting. Then, after a pause, unsettling. No one uses the word fear, but their answers linger. They describe staying later in their chairs, watching feeds they used to ignore. They describe nights that felt longer than they should have. They describe the hallway as heavy. No one can explain what that means. One guard admits to lowering the volume. The supervisor raises an eyebrow. Why? The guard hesitates. He looks down at his hands. Because it felt loud, he says. There is no follow-up question. The admission hangs in the air. Another guard confesses that he stopped reviewing archived footage after the incident, not because he was instructed to, but because he couldn't bring himself to open it again. He describes a sense of anticipation that never resolved, like waiting for a sound that doesn't come. The investigation notes this as stress-related avoidance, a neutral phrase. It does not capture the way his voice tightens when he speaks. One staff member submits a formal request for reassignment. Reason given: difficulty concentrating during overnight monitoring. Approved without comment. Another begins calling in sick more often. No reason specified. The building returns to normal operation, but the people do not. Supervisors review their own decisions. Why wasn't the issue escalated sooner? Why weren't more resources assigned? The answers are practical.
Because nothing visible happened. Because the system didn't fail. Because escalation requires justification, and justification requires evidence that can be shown. Feelings don't qualify. The investigators conclude that the incident does not meet criteria for a critical failure. No damage occurred, no intrusion was confirmed, no policy was broken. The system performed within specifications. The report reflects this. No mechanical faults identified, no software anomalies detected. Incident attributed to non-reproducible sensor behavior. The words are precise. They are also unsatisfying, because they avoid the central tension. The system worked. It detected something. The humans did not know what to do with that information. The failure was not a broken camera or faulty code. It was the absence of a framework for responding to an alert that could not be contextualized. There was no protocol for uncertain detection, no checkbox for acknowledged but unexplained. So the guards did what people often do when faced with ambiguity. They minimized, they delayed, they adapted quietly. They absorbed the discomfort rather than passing it upward. The investigation closes with recommendations: additional training, clearer escalation guidelines, stress management resources. All reasonable, all disconnected from the experience itself. The hallway remains unchanged. Camera C-17 continues to operate. It does not repeat the behavior. That, more than anything, reinforces the conclusion that the incident was anomalous, a one-off, an outlier. The archivist reads the final paragraph of the report slowly. Conclusion:
No system failure occurred. Human response factors contributed to prolonged uncertainty. The emphasis is telling: prolonged uncertainty, not danger, not threat, uncertainty. Because uncertainty is the part no one wants to carry. Machines don't mind it. They register, record, and move on. People do not. They search for meaning. They fill gaps with emotion. They remember how it felt to watch a hallway that refused to explain itself. One guard, interviewed last, says something that doesn't make it into the report. He says it quietly. "I don't think the system failed." The interviewer waits. "I think it did exactly what it was supposed to do," the guard continues. "It noticed something." The interviewer asks if he thinks someone was there. The guard shakes his head. "I don't know," he says. "I just know it wasn't nothing." That line is omitted. There's no place for it in the file. The investigation ends. The case moves towards sealing. The system remains trusted. The people are expected to recover. But something subtle has changed. Those who were there now understand that a system can function correctly and still leave you with questions that don't go away. They understand that being alerted without explanation can be more disturbing than being shown something clearly. And they understand that when a machine insists on remembering, it does not always help the humans who have to live with what it noticed. This is where the system failed, not because it malfunctioned, but because it revealed a limit, not in technology, but in the people tasked with interpreting it. The archivist closes the report, carefully, as if the paper itself might remember being handled. The file moves closer to sealing. The hallway returns to being just a hallway. But for those involved, the system no longer feels like background noise. It feels like something that might notice again, and next time, they are not sure they would know what to do with that knowledge.
After the investigation ends, the file does not close in anyone's mind. It sits, not actively troubling, but present, like a thought you don't finish because you already know it won't resolve cleanly. In the weeks that follow, explanations circulate, quietly, in hallways, in emails that are never sent, in conversations that end when someone else enters the room. None of them are official. All of them are attempts to make the record feel complete. The first theory is the simplest: environmental interference. It appears early in the maintenance notes and reappears often because it offers relief. Air currents, temperature changes, shifts in pressure when the building's systems cycle at night. It makes sense. The building is old. The ventilation system is layered on top of decades of renovations. Sensors can be sensitive. Dust can accumulate. Even light can behave strangely under fluorescent bulbs that have been burning too long. This explanation has the advantage of familiarity. It requires no further action. And yet, it fails in small, important ways. Environmental factors are not selective. They do not activate only one camera. They do not adhere to narrow time windows. They do not repeat with the same spacing, night after night. Most importantly, they do not produce proximity flags. The system's distance calculations require something to enter a defined range. Air does not do that. Dust does not linger. If this were interference, it would be messy, random. It was not. The second theory comes from the engineers: software pattern misinterpretation. The idea that the detection algorithm began to mistake static visual data for motion due to a rare combination of inputs, a feedback loop, a threshold misfire. There is documentation to support this possibility. Technical papers are cited. Similar systems have misclassified shadows before, or reflections, or camera noise under specific lighting conditions. The engineers test for this. They simulate it. They try to reproduce the behavior. They cannot. The algorithm behaves consistently across identical environments. No other camera on the network exhibits the same pattern. No update is released. No patch is issued. If this were a software issue, it should have appeared elsewhere. It did not. The third theory is less comfortable: human presence outside the frame. The idea that someone moved through the hallway without entering the camera's visible field.
standing just out of view, passing close enough to trigger proximity sensors without crossing into the recorded image. Some believe this is the most likely explanation. People do unexpected things. Security footage is limited. Blind spots exist. But this theory collapses under scrutiny. The hallway layout is reviewed again. There is nowhere to stand without appearing on camera. No alcoves, no recesses. The proximity sensor range overlaps fully with the visible frame. If someone had been there, they would have been seen. Additionally, no physical evidence supports this. No access logs indicate unauthorized entry. No door sensors were triggered. No footsteps were heard. No prints were found during inspection. To believe this theory requires accepting that someone was present without interacting with the environment in any detectable way. That is not impossible, but it is unprovable, which makes it unstable. The fourth theory is never written down. It circulates only as implication, intentional suppression. The suggestion that the case was sealed not because it was inconclusive, but because it was inconvenient. There were internal disagreements. That much is documented. Some supervisors argued for extended review. Others wanted the file closed quickly. The budget for further investigation was minimal. There was concern about precedent. What happens if you treat unexplained alerts as significant? How many similar cases would surface? How many resources would be consumed chasing uncertainty?
There are missing pages in the archive. This is not speculation. The pagination skips. Referenced attachments are absent. An email thread ends abruptly. No explanation is provided. This does not prove suppression, but it introduces doubt. The file feels curated, not falsified, just incomplete. Each theory holds briefly, then loosens. Environmental interference explains the system waking up, but not why it focused. Software misinterpretation explains the alerts, but not their discipline. Human presence explains proximity, but not absence. Suppression explains silence, but not the system's initial insistence. None of them are wrong. None of them are sufficient. The archivist does not weigh them, does not rank them. That is not the purpose of this chapter. The purpose is to show what happens when explanation becomes provisional, when each answer carries an asterisk. The unease does not come from the unknown. It comes from knowing that every explanation is partially convincing and partially inadequate, that there is no clean edge where certainty begins. People involved in the case eventually stop discussing theories, not because they agree, but because disagreement becomes exhausting. They return to their jobs, they monitor other feeds, they learn to trust the system again. Mostly. The hallway remains in use. No signage changes, no physical markers appear. It does not become a place of superstition. No one avoids it during the day, but those who were there at night carry something forward, a memory without a narrative, a record without an ending. One former guard describes it years later as unfinished. Not the case, the feeling. He says it's like reading a sentence that stops mid-thought. Your mind keeps waiting for the rest. The file stays sealed. Occasionally, someone requests access, a researcher, an auditor, an archivist like this one. Each time, the same materials are reviewed, the same still images, the same logs, the same gaps. Nothing new emerges, which over time becomes the most disturbing element, that the case does not evolve, it does not decay into myth, it does not sharpen into clarity, it simply remains. The archivist closes this chapter without conclusion, because there is none to offer, only a collection of explanations that fail softly, that nearly fit, that almost satisfy. The system noticed something. People noticed that the system noticed, and somewhere between those two observations, meaning dissolved. What remains is ambiguity. Not dramatic, not terrifying, just persistent, like the hallway itself, unchanged, waiting. And like the file, still sealed, not because it hides a truth too dangerous to reveal, but because no explanation has ever felt solid enough to replace the silence. The chapter ends here, not with a theory, but with the acknowledgement that some records do not deepen with time. They simply sit, unresolved, and the longer they sit, the more they resist being closed, even when no one is watching anymore.
Time passes, slowly, quietly, almost imperceptibly. The camera is replaced. A newer model, updated firmware, higher resolution. Its lens is clean, its sensors calibrated. The system runs diagnostics every night without error. Yet nothing changes. The hallway remains. Walls, floor, and fluorescent lights unchanged. People still walk through it, but no one lingers. No one stops. No one looks. No one carries the weight of waiting anymore. The night shifts continue. The guards rotate in and out, some familiar, some new. Those who witnessed the alerts that persisted for weeks, move on. Some carry it lightly, as an odd memory to be tucked away. Others carry it differently, a subtle tension in the way they step through corridors elsewhere, a pause when a camera light flickers, the knowledge that a system can notice things humans cannot, that it can insist even when nothing seems to be there. The footage from that night is archived, never reviewed again, but it is never deleted. Stored on redundant servers in secure locations, labeled File 006, sealed with care. Because the record remains, even when human curiosity does not. No motion is logged in that hallway again. Not a single alert, not a flash of movement, not a proximity flag. The building operates as it always did. Staff pass through the corridor without thought. Cleaning crews wipe down the floor. Maintenance checks wiring. The camera continues its watch, unremarked, unnoticed, silent except for the low hum of electricity and servers. And yet, in the quiet, the memory of that night persists. In logs, in reports, in the soft pause of a guard leaning over a monitor, in the way people remember waiting for something that did not appear. The archivist notes this carefully, because the story does not end with drama, it ends with absence. The absence of explanation, the absence of repetition, the absence of closure. The hallway exists, the camera exists, the record exists. All three remain, watching, waiting, as they have always done. The file remains open, and so does the question. Quiet, persistent, never resolved. Even as the building hums, as footsteps echo briefly, as doors open and close. The hallway has returned to normal, except in memory, except in the logs, except in the still low vibration of servers and the soft mechanical attention of a camera that once insisted on noticing. The archivist writes the final note in the sealed record. The system has not logged motion in that hallway since, but it continues to watch. The file remains open. And with that, the chapter, the file, pauses, not concluded, not forgotten, simply quiet, waiting for the next eye, the next question, the next moment of attention. The hallway exists, the memory exists, and the file exists. All else remains unspoken.